And welcome back, everyone, to the Pokemon Team Creation Series here on delightful Daylight Savings Time, springing forward. I'm still adjusting. Not that bad, though. My dad's and the dog are suffering a bit, but I'm okay. And this goes to some Serious Fi Gaming, who asked the question, what is Yhwach's, I think that's the pronunciation, Pokemon team? Now, if you don't know who Yhwach is, it's pronounced Yhwach, 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 Yhwach. I might be going through a couple different pronunciations, but Yhwach as we shorthand him. Yhwach is the main antagonist of the final arc of Bleach until the Hell arc eventually comes out. He is the Quincy King. He is the son of the Soul King, the being who holds the universe together. He waged a 1,000-year blood war against the Shinigami in Bleach. He is the ultimate big bad. And when we say ultimate, I don't mean like, oh yeah, we'll defeat you. I can do all these terrible things, but the heroes, overcome him. They lucked the hell out defeating him. They lucked out because Kubo basically was rushed, and he couldn't basically put it into as coherently as possible how exactly they were going to be able to defeat him, because Yhwach's one of the most actual broken guys in anime. We'll get into it a bit more, but let's break it down a little bit here. This was an interesting team to put together because there's a lot of things here that work in Yhwach's favor, don't work in Yhwach's favor. There's a lot of traits that are hard to quantify as a Pokemon team. So let's get down to it. Right out the gate, Yhwach is what is called a Quincy, a spiritually aware human. Technically, they're not even human. They're something not a little beyond human. DNA-wise, they're more or less human, but they have abilities, so they're technically something different. But for sake of argument, they're spiritually aware humans who can absorb spiritual energy, use it for attacks, kill hollows, which are evil beings. But unlike Shinigami, which help keep the balance of the universe by reincarnating the souls, purifying the souls of the hollows so the balance stays perfect, Quincy's just kill these things. They don't care about the balance, they care about staying alive. So unfortunately, their history is that of tragedy because they were ultimately wiped out until the remaining Quincy came and tried to take over the Soul Society. What I'm getting by all this is that because he's a Quincy and because he is the son of the Soul King, I knew I needed something that worked as, he's the progenitor of the Quincy race. I needed something that worked as a progenitor of something. I needed something that was a representation of God, but not quite as powerful as God, something that would have come from God. Which, when you break that down, technically speaking, he was the progenitor of all Pokemon, technically, but that's not quite true, thanks to Arceus being, alive. But I had to go with one of the core three. I had to go with either Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina. And not Giratina. I went with Giratina. One, it makes actually the most sense because Dialga and Palkia are two halves of the same coin. Technically, Shinigami and Quincy are, but you can make the argument Shinigami and Hollow are as well. But beyond that, he was kind of, I don't want to say he was cast out. He was not cast out per se, but he did go against his father in his own belief for his father's benefit. His backstory is really interesting. But point being, he is, to some degree, cast out. He is the rebel. And Giratina is, to some degree, the rebel as well. He also exists, the Quincy exists in a dimension of shadow, which while gravity, antimatter, what Giratina's domain is about, isn't quite the same. He is a very dark kind of Pokemon in that regard. He does hide in shadow. He's often depicted as emerging from shadows. He's equivalent to the other two as well, Dialga and Palkia. And his ghost type leans towards the spiritual essence that the Quincy's are able to interact with and have access to. Add on the shadowy wings that Giratina has, and you get a little bit of a reference to Yhwach's altered state when he absorbs the powers of the Soul King, which we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But one of the things I wanted to get out of the way is that Quincy's, despite Some exceptions are archers. They use bows and arrows. They use energy arrows, all that. So that sounds a lot like a Decidueye. Now, unfortunately, there aren't many other Pokemon that would be considered archers, unfortunately. Even Hisuian Decidueye is still technically an archer, though it uses its arrows a little bit more like a sword. But yeah, it's, again, a ghost type, leans into that kind of spiritual connection aspect, so forth and so on. But now, then before we get it going any further, let me get the last one I put on the list out of the way, Aegislash. The reason I chose Aegislash is because Yhwach, unlike a lot of other Quincy, actually does have a sword. Even though he uses arrows, he does have a sword. It's an energy sword. He also has a standard sword as well. And he's the king of Quincy's. He is the queen of them. So Pokemon with the ability King's Shield makes a lot of sense. I could have gone Calyrex, but I didn't feel that was right. I honestly just... Because one of the defining traits of Yhwach as well is that he is a warlord. He is not a... He claims peace, but it's a load of shit. He is a warlord. He wants to conquer and have full dominion over everything. So, yeah, no. Having a sword and shield Pokemon makes a lot of sense. But now we get into the abstract. So, right out the gate, we need to... I knew that one of the challenges for this team was going to be looking for a stand-in for his ability, the Almighty. And the Almighty is the comment I made earlier about him being one of the most hacks and mother effers in anime. What the Almighty is very simple. First off, its appearance is that of multiple irises, multiple pupils in your eye. But beyond that, what's the best way to put it? Anyone with the Almighty, depending on the level of the Almighty, and Yhwach's had 3, the Soul King's has 4, so we still don't know to a degree how more powerful his is than Yhwach's. Anyone with the Almighty is capable of not only seeing and comprehending infinite amount of timelines, futures, but actually manipulating them to their will and changing the outcome of them. That is one of the most ludicrous abilities, not just in anime, but in fiction as a whole. So, it's clear that there are no Pokemon that can do something even remotely close to that. But I knew I needed a representation for it. So, what I basically chose for this for his Mon here, and when you factor in the rest of his team, it kind of helps it all out, is Xatu. Now, why Xatu of all things? Well, Xatu is a Pokemon that has one eye looking at the past, but one eye looking at the future. It is constantly looking at both. That's why it stands so still all the time. To be fair, it can learn this technique, so it still works. Any Pokemon that can learn Future Sight would also work on this too, and luckily, Xatu is a Pokemon that I'm pretty certain can learn Future Sight, so that works out too. But more to the point is that, there is no Pokemon that can literally look at infinite amounts of timelines, save for maybe one more on this list, and we'll get to him in just a second. Or manipulate the future from the present. Like, there's no Pokemon that can do that. The only Pokemon that even manipulate time in any capacity are Dialga, who is the Pokemon of time, and Celebi, who can travel through time. None of the Ultra Beasts are actually manipulating time. They're manipulating space-time more than anything else. None of the... not Ultra Beast. What's the other one that just came? Paradox Pokemon. None of the Paradox Pokemon are manipulating time. They're just brought through time. So yeah, it's an ability that's impossible to quantify in Pokemon terms. But I think Xatu with a Future Sight add onto its roster is maybe about as close as you get to it. But last but not least, we got to talk about actually the 2 remaining aspects of Yhwach real quick. And a third, technically, because he did ultimately absorb his father, the Soul King's power, and temporarily become the new Soul King, is what he did. And he became very grotesque monsters. I was tempted to use that image for Yhwach. It probably would have gotten a lot of hits. I'd be like, what the hell? For people who didn't know what the character is. But I need something to represent that, but also the fact that one of his main abilities is not just to take power. He can take power from anyone he's given power to, or from anyone he deems fit, theoretically. So the ability to take power, but also the ability to grant power. And specifically, one of his main abilities was to inscribe a letter on a person's soul. And that letter and ability were determined by the person themselves. And so, I knew there was no way to really do that somewhere with the Almighty. This is why Yhwach is such a difficult character to do a team for. But, that said, when you look at the two in combination, I think we get a decent combination. So we have Arceus. Let's try that one more time. We have Arceus and Necrozma also add on team. Ultra Necrozma, to be fair. Now, why these two? Well, Arceus is God in the Pokemon world. That's definitive. At least until something higher than him shows up. One of the games, I can't remember, was it Xenoverse or something like that, made an actual stronger version of a Pokemon that garners more power than even Arceus. But, what was I going to say? Arceus being God, it would make sense that maybe this isn't a Pokemon that was originally on his team. Maybe this is a Pokemon that he stole off his father's team, which, if you want a Soul King video, everyone, let me know. Soul King Pokemon team. Oh, God almighty. The Soul King Pokemon team. I am literally, you can't see me because I'm not on screen. I'm literally holding my eyes together and like, oh, God, what's that team going to look like? But, obviously, it would have an Arceus on it. But, beyond that, Arceus is the closest thing I could interpret to inscribing abilities, giving abilities out to individuals. Because what Arceus doesn't normally have around him, which you usually find in the Pokemon world, are his plates, each representing a certain type that power up Pokemon types, Pokemon attacks of a certain type. And so, I think Arceus does work in that regard, whereas on the opposite side, Necrozma is one of the only, and I mean only Pokemon I can think of off the top of my head, that legitimately steals the power of other Pokemon. That legitimately stole the power of Solgaleo and Lunala, and then ultimately absorbed it into himself to be the light to become this Pokemon, to become this form. So he is legitimately one of the only Mon I know of that legitimately steals power and steals energy and steals life force, all that kind of stuff. Now you could make an argument like any ghost type could do that, but it's not the same thing. Ghost types are stealing your life force. They're stealing your soul, per se. And Yhwach can do that too, to a degree, but he's not just stealing your soul, if he's able to, which that's kind of up for debate. He's stealing your actual power and energy and adding it to himself. That is a Necrozma move of the Yin Yang. I can't think of many Pokemon that can actually do that. Let me know in the comments below if you can think of any other Pokemon that actually steals other Pokemon's power for themselves. Now, before you comment, Xerneas and Yveltal kind of do fall into that category, but it's not the same thing. They do it because they're part of the cycle of rebirth and death, or life and death. They do it because they have to cocoon themselves and they absorb the energy around them to do so, one way or the other. So they can do that, but they're not stealing Pokemon's power. They're stealing their life force around the area and then going to sleep for a while. And while Yhwach did do that, he was unconscious for 900 years. It's not quite the same thing. So I wouldn't put Yveltal and Xerneas into that category. I am talking about specifically Pokemon that literally steal the power or abilities of others. Now, there are abilities. Apparently, it's Imposter that can do that. Any Pokemon with Imposter, in theory, can do that. But it's only kind of temporary. And it's only against one Mon. Let's see here. Disguise only gives you the appearance, or Illusion. Illusion only gives you the appearance. Mimic, Copycat, Sketch is one, but Sketch is just copying an ability. It's not stealing an ability. I'm talking about outright stealing abilities. I don't know. What do you think? And let me know in the comments below. But the last question, as always, how balanced is Yhwach's team? Well, he does have the advantage of having 3 legendaries, 2 true legendaries, 1 mythical on his team. So he's got that advantage. He's also got the advantage of having fully evolved Pokemon on his team, which can never hurt. But when going over the types, and we're assuming Arceus is going to be just a normal type here, by the way. Assuming that we have, assuming that Arceus is normal, there are two types that give this team a serious problem. And I mean a legitimate problem. One, well, technically, let me read that. Let's see that. Three types, actually. So one is dark types. Dark types are problematic for this team because none of the secondary types of any of the mon on this team are neutral to dark. Grass, flying, dragon, steel, none of them are neutral to dark, as far as I know. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. None of them are resistant to dark. Let me rephrase that. None of them are resistant. If they were resistant, dark would be neutral against them, but they're not, which means dark goes through all except for Arceus on this team. Now, granted, again, you do have all fully evolved or all legendary mon on this team, so it would take a very powerful dark type, HMA anyone, to be, and I'll get to the every Bleach character at some point, to be able to take down this team. But yeah, dark types are a problem for this team. Ice, I realized, is another problem for this team. Not to quite the same extent as dark, because Aegislash definitely resists ice. But Necrozma, Giratina, Xatu, Decidueye, no, they're all weak to ice with no resistances. So ice is another problem on this team. And last but not least is also Ghost. Ghost is going to cleave through this team. If you get a strong enough Ghost type, you're going to go through this team pretty hard, actually. Because Ghost is weak to Ghost. So Giratina and Decidueye have no special resistances. Neither does Aegislash. And Psychic is also weak to Ghost, so Necrozma and Xatu are going to have problems as well. Again, you have fully evolved and legendaries on the team, so even their weaknesses can be covered, sure, by their just impressive stats. But otherwise, yeah, those are the problem types. And look, usually it's only like maybe two types that can give a team a problem. Once you start to get into the three or more, you realize the team isn't as overly balanced as it should be. Luckily, it makes up for having some very overly powerful mon on the team. And luckily, Arceus doesn't actually carry any of those weaknesses with him. His only weakness is fighting in normal types. So there's that. Until then, though, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.